Hi folks, in this video I'm going to talk about the word voilà. Voilà is definitely one of the superstars of, the spoken French language. If you ask any average French speaker what this word means, or if you ask for, the meaning of that word on forums, etc., or even what you will learn in school, is often that voilà means there you are, right? This is not entirely false, even though I think it's a very inaccurate way of translating it. But this is not entirely false. So why is it that you're often taught that voilà means there you are? Well, it's simply because it's often used when you give something to someone. For example, let's say you want to ask your friend to pass you the salt. You say, "Excuse-moi, tu peux me passer le sel?" Right, which means, excuse me, literally, you can pass me the salt? Can you pass me the salt? Excuse-moi, tu peux me passer le sel? And your friend answers, gives you the salt and says, voilà, right? You could also say, voilà, s'il te plaît, right? S'il te plaît, s'il te plaît. We don't say s'il te plaît, but s'il te plaît generally in the spoken language. Voilà, s'il te plaît. Or even, tiens, voilà, s'il te plaît. Right, tiens means hold, literally, so it's also something you often say when you give something to someone, hold, tiens, right, so he could say, tiens, voilà, voilà s'il te plaît, tiens s'il te plaît, tiens voilà s'il te plaît. So right, any of these words, either separately or combined together, can be used when giving something to someone, right? But that's not the only use of the word voilà. In fact, the original meaning of the word voilà, and I insist on original because that's no longer really the way we perceive it today. So the original meaning is see there, right? It's composed of two words, voir, which is the imperative form of the verb voir, which means see, and là, which means there. Voilà, see there. And there's another word, which you might have heard about, voici, which originally means see here. Voici, vois ici, voici, see here. Okay? So these words are primarily used as presentatives, namely to introduce things. Okay? So normally voilà is used to introduce things which are far away, while voici is used to introduce things which are closer to you. But in reality, in spoken French, we don't really. Voilà tends to be used in both cases. Actually, it's exactly like you have ici, which means here, and là, which means there. In spoken French, even if you're referring to something which is close to you, you can say that this thing is là, there, but meaning here, right? So you can use voilà in all cases, but you can't use voici in all cases. If you say voici, it only means you're talking about something close. Okay, just so that you know. So these words are used as presentatives to introduce things. But what do I mean by introduce? So it can be introducing something, as in specifying what it is, identifying it. For example, voici mon neveu, Frédéric. Literally, here is my nephew, or see here my nephew, Frederick, but that actually means this is my nephew, Frederick. Or voilà mon patron, Pierre. Or voilà Pierre, mon patron, right? Literally, see there, Pierre, my boss, okay? So what you're basically doing when you say that is stating that Frederick is your nephew, and that Pierre is your boss, okay? Except that by using voilà, you're adding a didactic dimension, since you're showing them the real world, okay? Now you can also use it in the same way, but to introduce the answer to a question. For example, to the question, where does he live? Alright? Which in French would be something like où est-ce qu'il habite? Or où habite-t-il, even though that would be very formal. So, où est-ce qu'il habite? And let's say that you're actually next to where he lives, okay, and you want to tell people that this is where he lives, you could say voilà où il habite. Okay? Voilà où il habite. Alright? So you're stating that où il habite, so where he lives, is there, and presenting it by using voilà. Okay? Let's say that we have John, and John for some reason this morning left the workplace for no apparent reason, and everyone's wondering why. But you know why. It's because John on his desk found a paper saying you're fired, okay? And that's why he left. Well, if everyone's asking pourquoi est-ce que Jean est parti, right? John, pourquoi est-ce que Jean est parti? Huh? You could answer, you could take the paper basically, and so let's imagine that's the paper, and you say, with written on it, you're fired, and you say, voilà pourquoi il est parti. Voilà pourquoi il est parti. Okay, so you're showing the reason, and stating that this is the answer to the question, pourquoi est-il parti? Okay, voilà pourquoi il est parti. Right? Now, it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to, when you use voilà, it doesn't mean that you have to show a concrete object, okay? You can also use it to introduce a statement. For example, so still taking the same example of John leaving the workplace and no one knows why. So, you know that it's because he's been fired, the boss said, okay, John, I'm sorry, but you're fired today, so you just leave. That would be a very rude way of doing it, I guess. But anyway, so John learned that he was fired, and that's why he left, okay, suddenly. What you could say is, eh bien, voilà pourquoi John est parti. Voilà pourquoi Jean est parti. And you explain why, okay? Voilà pourquoi Jean est parti. Blah, 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 blah. The explanation, okay? Right? So it doesn't have to be a concrete object. When you say voilà, it can also be used as, a word that, like you can use that word to introduce an explanation, for example. Voilà pourquoi ta ta ta. So here is the answer to the question pourquoi and then you give the answer. Okay? So far in these examples, I've been using voilà as part of some sort of identification process. So I'm basically stating that this individual equals my nephew, this person equals my boss, this equals the answer to the question, etc. But voilà can also be used to point out at something or attract people's attention on something, right? So let's imagine, for example, that you're in a group of friends and you guys all know someone called Mary, all right? And guess what? You see Mary, suddenly you see her right there, okay? What you could tell your friends is something like, oh, regardez les gars, voilà Marie, okay? Which could translate as, oh, look guys, literally look guys, see there Mary. So I would translate it as, here comes Mary, okay? Now, by the way, note that if you want to introduce a pronoun, it shouldn't be after voilà, but before it. So you say, voilà Marie, okay, here comes Mary, but you say, la voilà, voilà Marie, la voilà, voilà Pierre, le voilà, okay, voilà mes amis, here are my friends or something like that, voilà mes amis, les voilà, okay, so the pronoun comes before voilà, not after it. So in these cases, I'm introducing people, but you can also use it to introduce an object. So let's say you see a police car arriving, and you wonder what's happening. You could say, "Oh, voilà une voiture de police. Je me demande ce qui se passe." Okay, so here comes a police car. I wonder what's happening. I wonder what's happening. Okay, so you're basically pointing out at something or attracting people's attention on something, or both at the same time, okay? Something like that. What you should know, however, is that in these cases, it's not just that you're attracting people's attention on something, but sometimes, especially with people, there's often this notion of movement, okay? So basically when you say voilà Marie, for example, sometimes you mean, oh look at Mary, there she is, or something like that. But sometimes what you mean is Mary is arriving. Okay, so for example, let's imagine that you're all waiting for Mary in a house, and she's supposed to come, to come visit you, and you hear you hear someone ring at the door. Okay, and you suppose that this is Mary. You could say, oh, voilà Marie. And in that case, it doesn't mean that you're pointing at her or attracting people's attention on it, but rather communicating the information that since the doorbell rang, it probably means that Mary is arriving. So it can often mean actually that someone is arriving. So actually, I would even tell you that as a native speaker of French, sometimes in these cases, voilà almost feels like a verb. Okay, I know that sounds very strange, but that's at least, how I perceive it sometimes. It almost feels like a verb. For example, let's imagine I'm in a house and I'm upstairs and other people are downstairs and they were cooking and dinner's ready and they call me, they say, Fred, come, dinner's ready, right? What I could say is, okay, me voilà, okay, me voilà. In that case doesn't mean here I am or something like that, but it rather means I'm arriving, okay, I'm coming, me voilà. So voilà in that case conveys some sort of notion of movement, okay? Or another example, still with this notion of movement, let's imagine, so you have pupils in a classroom, and they're, I don't know, playing together or something, being very undisciplined or something, because the teacher is not there yet. But one of them hears the teacher arriving, like he thinks he's heard, steps, and he thinks the teacher is arriving. What he could say is, les gars, voilà le prof. Okay, les gars, voilà le prof. In that case, voilà le prof doesn't really mean look at the teacher, or oh, there the teacher, or something like that. But that rather means the teacher is arriving. Okay, so the meaning of voilà in that case can vary between pointing at something, so from pointing at something to expressing the idea that something or someone is arriving or going towards you or something like that. I hope I'm being clear. So coming back to what I said at the beginning, I suppose that now you all realize that saying that voilà means there you are, as probably some of you have been told, is very limitative. I mean, it's true in a certain situation, but the meaning of voilà is far more complex than that. Now, this is not yet the end of this video, because what I've explained to you so far is just the basic primary meaning of the word, okay? But what I'm about to explain to you right now is what will make the difference between a basic French learner and someone who really knows about spoken French, because voilà is used in many other cases as well. Voilà can be used as a means to introduce a speech or an explanation or a narrative. Very much like in English, you can say right or all right, so as a way to start, to signal that you're going to explain something. I often do that. All right, so I'd say that the real problem is blah 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 blah. For example, well, in French, voilà can serve the same purpose. Voilà. Alors la situation est grave, mais laissez-moi vous parler de la solution à laquelle j'ai pensé. Okay, so that means all right. So the situation, the problem is really serious, but let me talk to you about the solution I thought about. All right. So you can use voilà in this way. You can also use it at the end of a speech, to signal that you're done speaking, and in that case it's much more useful, because when you use it at the beginning, it doesn't really serve any purpose apart from, just some sort of filler, or it lets you sometimes to think sometimes or something like that, But when you use it at the end of a speech, it can be really useful because it lets people know that you're done and that you don't have anything to add. So, for example, if it's a somewhat official speech, with and you have an audience, for example, listening to you, that's when people know that they can applaud, for example. So you're like, Blablabla, et alors oui, je pense que ta ta ta, et gna gna gna, et donc oui, et alors la conclusion ce serait que ta 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 ta, et donc voilà. Je dirais que ta 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 ta. Voilà. Alright, so when you say voilà, they know that it's the end of your speech. It's like, in that case, saying voilà is like saying, okay, the end. Right, so they know they can applaud. Stand-up comedians, for example, in France, right after when their sketch is done, when they're done speaking, they don't have anything to add. They might sometimes end, by saying something like, voilà, merci, c'est tout pour moi. Voilà, merci, c'est tout pour moi. It's a very famous kind of formula with stand-up comedians in French often use that. So voilà, c'est tout pour moi, and that means it's finished. You can applaud. Voilà can also be used when something embarrassing just happened and you don't really know what to say. So just to sort of fill the silence. Let's imagine that you're going out with two friends of yours, and these two friends happen to be a couple, so they're dating each other, But suddenly they have a quarrel, sorry, I can't say that word, a quarrel, right in front of you, alright, which can be a bit embarrassing, or very embarrassing sometimes, because you're in the middle and you don't want to be a part of this. So let's imagine that at some point the guy goes as far as saying something like, but c'est quoi? De toute façon, t'es qu'une grosse pute, So that means, but you know what? Anyway, you're just a bitch, And the girlfriend is not saying anything, or let's imagine she's crying or something like that, and the boyfriend is just, sulking and being super angry, and you're in the middle and you don't know what to say, like this. And so you might say, to sort of fill the silence, this big embarrassing silence, something like, voilà, voilà, That's what I would say, generally I think, French, native French speakers generally repeat it 2 times, I think in that case, so voilà, voilà, So that's one way in which you can use voilà as well, so just to fill the silence and make it slightly less embarrassing. One other way in which the word voilà can also be used is as some sort of what I'd call a validator, So to validate things, for example, to show someone that you agree with him. Let's say someone says, tu sais, je pense que le plus important au final, c'est de participer. So, I think the most important thing in the end is just to participate. And to show that you agree with that, you could say, ouais, voilà. Okay? Which would mean, yeah, I agree. I'm with you on that one. Okay? You can also use it to validate an explanation and show that you understood. For example, let's say that you didn't understand something and someone explains it to you, and finally you understood thanks to this explanation. You could say, ah, voilà, maintenant je comprends. It would be like saying, oh, okay, there you go, now I understand, So to validate an explanation. You can also use it to confirm something. Let's say your friends are going to buy sandwiches, and you're staying home for some reason. You're staying there, and you said you wanted a tuna sandwich, but without salad. But for some reason, this wasn't super clear. So just to make sure, like one of your friends asks you, donc tu veux un sandwich au thon, mais sans salade, c'est ça? So you want a tuna sandwich, but without salad, right? Okay. And to confirm this, you can say, ouais, voilà, right? Ouais, voilà, c'est ça. Which is like saying, yes, exactly, or yes, that's it. See what I mean? So you're validating this. You're confirming what he's saying. Now this can this doesn't have to be used to validate just things that people say, but you can also use it to validate some things someone did. Let's imagine, for example, that you're a gym coach and your trainee is performing, I don't know, a bent over dumbbell row, for example, So when you think that he's, doing the right movement, you could say, voilà, voilà, ouais, c'est ça, voilà, continue, And this voilà is validating what he's doing, you know. Voilà in that case means, yeah, like that, yeah, go on, like this, you know, voilà, validating what he's doing. You can also use it to sort of say that to signal that you've reached your goal, kind of. Like, let's say you lost your bag, for example. You've been searching for it all day, okay? And finally you find it, you know. To signal that you found it and that it's no longer necessary to search for it, you might say something like, ah, voilà, c'est bon, je l'ai trouvé. Voilà, c'est bon, je l'ai trouvé. Which means this voilà would be like, I think in English you could say, oh, there we go, I found it, you know. And even sometimes, I think if you, like when a native French speaker is performing a slightly difficult task which requires a bit of concentration and with several steps, like let's say, for example, they're doing an origami, for example, and you know, they're looking at the explanations and, you know, applying each step carefully. You might see them, you know, whispering to themselves, you know, not even thinking about it, just automatically, you know, whispering things like, ok, voilà, voilà, ok, ensuite, voilà, voilà. You know, after each step, they would be saying like voilà, 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 you know, and that would be kind of a way to validate each step. That's like saying, okay, this is done, okay, now this, okay, that's done, voilà, voilà. You know, that's like a validation. Voilà can also be used to express the idea that a situation is irreversible or fatal, and also sometimes with the idea that you had warned, you know, your interlocutor about this, you know. So let's say, for example, you have just bought your 5-year-old son an ice cream, and he's holding it, and you tell him, eat it now because otherwise it's going to melt and the bowl might fall, okay? But he's not listening to you, know. He's like, no, I don't want to eat it. You know, like I don't want to eat it right now, or something like that. And he's just waiting, you know, and suddenly the bowl falls, you know. Well, at that moment you could say, et voilà, je t'avais prévenu, you know, like, et voilà, which means something like, there you go, I had warned you, you know, et voilà, you know. Because you had warned him and the situation is irreversible because you're not going to buy him another ice cream. Or let's say you're having a quarrel with your girlfriend right before going on holiday somewhere, you know, and at some point she tears the ticket that would allow you to board the plane and you have no other ticket, right? Well, then you could say, et voilà, maintenant on peut plus partir, you know. And there you go, now we can't leave anymore, right? So that expresses the fact that the situation is irreversible, you know. Now it's like the ticket is torn and you can't use it anymore, right? Et voilà, done, finished, fatal, the end, goodbye, you know, et voilà. Now finally I'm going to end this video on a completely different use of the word voilà. Indeed, that word can be used as part of expressions about time or duration. So for example, when you want to say, I've been waiting for 3 hours. You know, in French you can say, il y a 3 heures que j'attends, ça fait 3 heures que j'attends. You probably already know this if you've been learning French for a little while. But what you can also say is, voilà 3 heures que j'attends. Okay? Voilà 3 heures que j'attends. Or, voilà maintenant 3 heures que j'attends. Okay, and if you just use voilà on its own, you know, voilà que, this would mean I have just blah blah blah. You know, for example, if you want to say I have just arrived, you could say voilà que j'arrive. Okay, and if you want to emphasize it even more, you know, to express the idea that you've really just arrived, like 1 second ago, you could say voilà à peine que j'arrive. Voilà que j'arrive. Voilà à peine que j'arrive. Okay, I've just arrived. Voilà, that's it, folks. I hope you liked this video. I hope this video is going to be useful to you. Please feel free to ask anything in the comments, and see you next time.